Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another comic book review. There are several MCU movies that I haven't watched in over 2 years at this point that would honestly make really good material for a review at some point in the future, as well as some movies that, my opinion may have changed over time and could warrant a re-review. But for this video, given that the villain of this movie is making his MCU return at some point in the near future, most likely in the Vision show, let's take a look at Avengers Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, and the one that is generally considered the weakest of the four current ones. That could change with Doomsday and Secret Wars, fingers crossed, please no. But for the worst MCU movie, my opinion then is pretty similar to the opinion now. It's good, but the main difference is that now I am a lot more sure of my reasons why I say that and why I don't feel as strongly about it as I do the two from Phase 3. Like I said in the beginning, the Phase 1 Avengers movie could get a re-review at some point because I am starting to have second thoughts about, what I said in that video. But as for this movie, I'm finding that there's something about my taste in movies that's definitely applying here. My usual rule is that I can ignore a kind of weak-ish story if you have strong characters. And thankfully, this movie does have strong characters. Not to say that the story is bad, but the characters are definitely what's carrying this. Starting with the titular Avengers, I guess Ultron's also in the title, but screw it, the titular Avengers. This is their franchise after all. Yeah, starting with the Avengers, here it's obvious that there has been quite a bit of time that has passed between the first two movies because they feel a lot more like a well-oiled machine than they did in the first movie. Granted, the first movie is, the first time meeting each other, so of course they're going to butt heads a lot more frequently. You can kind of see why I'm not very confident in the points I made in the Avengers review. And sure, here they still butt heads, though at the very least it is still about valid criticisms. But when it comes to fighting off Ultron and with the Battle of Sokovia and even the cold open at the Hydra base, it shows that despite their differences, they're able to put those aside and work together as a team to save the day. That's what I like about teams like this, the Fantastic Four, and even the X-Men. While they bicker at times, because they are a family, families bicker. If your family doesn't bicker, then I don't know if I should be happy for you or concerned. But yes, they bicker, but they work incredibly well when they need to. And it's not just the Avengers that I liked a lot in this movie, but it's also the villain. I forgot how good of a villain Ultron was in this movie. He has a very interesting origin, where he was born from both Tony Stark's paranoia of another invasion, combined with his arrogance. That's basically the Jurassic Park quote, spending too much time thinking about whether or not you could, that you don't stop to think if you should, which is one of my favorite movie quotes of all time, fun fact, because it is the truest thing. But it's a combination of that paranoia and arrogance that leads to the creation of this AI who's meant to protect the world, but does the wrong research. He looks way too much at the bad that humanity's caused throughout the years and none of the good that they've done. And so comes to the conclusion that we all just need to go. That because we've hurt so many people, that caused so much damage to the human race, that the whole thing just needs to be eradicated. So it creates a scenario where obviously you're rooting against him because, we're all human and we want to live, but at the same time you can kind of see why he thinks the way he does. You don't condone it at all. If you do, I'm a little concerned for you, not gonna lie. But you get it. We've all learned about the atrocities that humanity's caused over the years, all the unnecessary wars that have happened. So you can kind of see where he's coming from, even though you strongly disagree with his methods. I almost said agree. I almost proved my own point. I also like the Maximoffs in here, both Wanda and Pietro. See, I don't read a lot of the comics, so I don't know how accurate that name is for Quicksilver, but regardless, they do make for a nice duo of characters where I really like their relationship as siblings. You don't really get to see it that much until the Battle of Sokovia, but they, like the Avengers, they do work very well as a team, and we don't really see them bicker all that much. Then again, there aren't really any scenarios where that would happen, and of course, this is the movie where Quicksilver dies. Small spoiler for anyone who somehow hasn't seen this movie yet. And I also think that their abilities lead to some interesting scenes, whether it be Quicksilver getting the jump on any of the Avengers, the whole Thor's hammer scene where Pietro grabs it and gets flung back, and everything with Wanda. Wanda's already one of my favorite MCU characters, but she had a really strong start in this movie where she actually managed to trap most of the Avengers, with the exception of Tony, who was fighting Ultron at the time, and Hawkeye, who already went through that in the first movie. But how she managed to trap them each in their own little headspaces and their biggest nightmares. And then, of course, she also gave way for the whole Hulk versus Hulkbuster scene, which, might I add, this is an Avengers movie, and really this is just an MCU movie in general, so of course the action is really good. And since this is an Avengers movie, there were several standout fight scenes. Of course, the first movie had the fight between Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. I probably could have just said Tony, Steve, and Thor, and you'd still get it, but I don't know. My brain was doing something else. And then the battle for New York against the Chitauri, a very memorable scene. Here, I'd say the standout scenes are the fight against the Ultron bots in Avengers Tower, the Hulk versus Hulkbuster fight in, what is that, Africa? I forget what country it is. And then the Battle of Sokovia, especially when they're surrounding Ultron's Doomsday button and fighting off all the Ultron bots. The scene where Danny Elfman's score kicks in, well, the part where the score kicks in is just my favorite. It's my favorite scene in the whole movie. Just that surrounding shot of that slow-mo surrounding shot of all of them fighting the Ultron bots. And honestly, I don't know if Alan Silvestri was busy for this movie, but Danny Elfman is a really good replacement for him. Then again, Danny Elfman's an excellent composer in general. Say what you want about the guy. So honestly, can't argue with that. I mean, he did score for the much better Tim Burton Chocolate Factory movie, and I will die on that hill. So there's a lot of good coming from this movie, mostly due to the characters, the action, and the score, as is the usual with a lot of good MCU movies. There are some issues. I do like the relationship with the 6 Avengers and all the new members they end up adding, but Nat and Bruce, honestly, my feelings on their chemistry is kind of mixed. I love the fact that they relate to each other as these two people that society generally views as monsters, both because one turns into a giant green monster and because the other is an assassin or a former assassin. I like the relatability that they share with each other there. I don't know how I feel about the fact that they try to make it romantic. I feel like they easily could have made it, a close friendship without having to make it romantic. I can see a scenario where I say scenario a lot in these videos, don't I? I can see an instance where a romantic relationship could work between the two of them, but honestly, I think it probably would have been a little bit better if they had stayed friends, especially now that Scar is in the picture and it just makes things really awkward. It does also feel like Ultron's whole plan happens a little too fast. I get that it's because he's an AI and he can do things super fast, so he can have all these machines built within hours. But one little line of dialogue explaining all that probably could have fixed this whole issue. I will say what one small line of dialogue wouldn't change is just how small this movie feels, given that Ultron is an AI. Of course, I can't just assume that the filmmakers had the foresight to just see into the 2020s and just get an idea of what AI is like now. But it's still feels like this movie is a lot smaller than it really should be. Ultron is an AI, so you could have him take over technology all over the world. You'll see how that works out with all of Tony's suits and like all the nuclear codes and pretty much just any dangerous technology. It feels like this had the potential to be a much larger movie, for it to be a lot bigger in scale. And, sure, it's an early Avengers movie, but the first movie still felt pretty big because the whole third act was six heroes fighting an entire army of aliens across one of the biggest cities in America. So, I still feel like with Ultron, they could have gone bigger. They could have made this almost a planetary scale, like a planetary scale movie. And I get that's what they were trying to do with the whole meteor thing. Didn't quite pan out because it was so hyper focused on one chunk of one city in the third act. I don't know. I've been rambling a lot on this one issue. It is kind of my biggest issue that, because it doesn't feel like they use Ultron to his fullest potential because they have Vision wipe him from, from the internet in general. Feels like by doing that, they kind of kneecapped what makes Ultron so dangerous. Which I did forget to mention, I do like the philosophical back and forth that Vision and Ultron have. That's an interesting way to introduce Vision and kind of give him that brief dynamic with Ultron. So overall, I would say that I like Age of Ultron more than I did back in 2022 when I first watched it. I still don't think it's a great movie. It's still only getting a 3.5, which still, that's a good score that's pretty close to great. It's good, but not quite, the kind of movie that would get a 4 or a 5. It has a lot of great character work, and as always, the action and the music are both fantastic. But it does leave a lot to be desired, especially with how small it feels compared to what it could have been. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this review of Avengers Age of Ultron. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe for more fun content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.